Hi everyone, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. So welcome to our Bealtaine Living Earth Festival. We're delighted to have you here with us again. So as you know, we're going to be talking about wildlife on the seashore. And for this session, we're going to be talking about crustaceans. So your crabs and your barnacles, and you'll hear about the rest in a minute. So we're delighted to be joined by Anna from the Atlantic Aquarium up in Galway. And she's going to be able to answer some of your questions at the end. So your teacher can just pop those into the chat box, or because we're a small group here on Zoom, you can unmute and ask your questions either if you'd like. And we would love you to do that. So have a think about your questions throughout and get ready to ask Anna at the end. But for now, we're going to show you our video all about crustaceans. Enjoy.
Everybody, and welcome to the Explorers Wild About Wildlife on the Seashore. Today we're going to be talking about crustaceans.
The crustacean family get a really bad rep because they go around eating all the dead stuff on the beach. This is why we call them scavengers.
And they're also known as predators. They eat small animals. They're armor plated with claws that can kill.
Gosh, they sound a bit like a nasty bunch. But did you know crustaceans like crabs and sandhoppers are really important on our seashore? The role they play, as well as being predators, are decomposers. What that means is they eat all the dead material, or lots of the dead material on the shore, such as dead plant and animal material. Another really important role that they play, they're food for other animals. So animals like bigger fish like blennies, seabirds like seagulls, and even animals like otters and seals will like to eat some crabs. Did you know that crustaceans can be found on all parts of the seashore? They come in all shapes and sizes and belong to different groups, such as decapods, amphipods, and isopods, to name a few. One of the most fascinating isopods on the seashore is the pill bug, or Mealcrean in Irish. It can be found under rocks, around the middle shore. The pill bug isopod lies flat attached to the rock, and when they're disturbed, they roll up into tiny little balls, like a little pill shape. Sometimes they are also called roly-polies. They grow to about 1 centimetre, about the size of your fingernail. What I love about the pill bug isopod is that they have giant relatives that live in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The giant isopod can grow to just over 40 centimetres, the same size as a puppy. However, they are a lot scarier and look like aliens. A lot of the isopods and the amphipods are related to woodlouse, like the ones you'd find in your garden. One of these is called the common sea slater, or chlorshock craw in Irish. It lives in the upper shore and splash zone. The sea slater is an omnivore, which means it eats plant and animal material. It comes out at night and feeds on decaying matter like dead seaweed and animals such as seashells along the upper shore. It then hides in dark places during the day. That nearly 2,000 species of crustacean have been recorded in Ireland. Even before we head down to the middle and lower parts of the shore, a lot of these tiny crustaceans are hidden away under rocks and amongst the decaying seaweed.
Yeah, that's right. We can even find sandhoppers here in the upper shore. This pile of dead seaweed here is perfect. And if we just lift it up, we'll see them just hiding underneath.
Oh, cool. You can see them hopping around there. But I think I'm going to go to the middle shore to find some more fierce crustaceans.
Me too!
What you will need to have handy while watching is a pen or pencil and your workbook. Don't forget to check out the Explorer's Safety and Conservation Code. These will help you stay safe on the seashore. Perfect. The sandhopper, or drankid trawl, will be found all over the shore, from the upper all the way down to the lower, but the best places to look are under rocks like these or under dead or decaying seaweed. Now they'll be found in their thousands across the beach. Now you can imagine them like a little army of cleaners just making their way, eating all the dead and decaying pieces of seaweed that you'll find here. Now sandhoppers are pretty easy to recognize in that their reaction to you actually finding them is one of a mad dash or a hop or a leap, as you might see them do. Now you won't see them for long, because once you move that piece of seaweed or that rock, they will disappear pretty quickly as they try and get away and find some more cover. Now a really interesting thing about sandhoppers is they have this kind of internal tidal clock that's linked to the tide, where they will actually change their behavior based on whether the tide is in or out. And they don't actually need to be on the shore for that to work. So we know that it's an internal activity that they do. Now, if you do manage to get a close look at them, the things to look out for are they've got these two little small black eyes. They've got these very unusual antennae where one is often longer than the other. The color can vary, but you're kind of talking maybe a gray, brown, sometimes yellowish type color as well. They have a curled tail that's divided into segments, and those segments are actually what lets the tail flick and give them their jump that allows them to escape any danger that they sense. Now, I'm going to just place their rock just back gently over them here, just so that I'm going to let them go back to foraging, and I'm going to head down to the lower shore and have a look at what's there. Hi Noreen.
Hiya, Porg.
What have you found?
I've been down here on the middle shore looking for crustaceans, and I'm after finding barnacles, or Thoravon corriga cutchin. Now, barnacles are, I think they're incredible, because when you think about the sandhopper, the way it was hopping all over the place on you earlier, barnacles are like the opposite, but they're still part of that crustacean family. This rock is covered in these animals. So this acorn, common acorn barnacle, is living here stuck onto the rock for its entire life. Its body is made up of 6 plates which form a little cone-shaped house. And then it has 2 separate plates up at the top. We like to describe those as sliding doors. Now, the little animal that's inside this shell or case is actually stuck onto the rock with his head. And when the tide comes in, he slides back, or she slides back those sliding doors and sticks its feet out to feed and catch all the food. When the tide then goes out again and it's, under predation, might get eaten by another animal, it shuts up those doors and it's safe, nice inside in its shell. It's a wonderful adaptation to have. This one here is really interesting because if we have a look at it, this one's empty. Now, there could be a number of reasons for that, but obviously barnacles are food for other animals. So when you find empty ones like this, it might be the animal's died of natural causes, or it could be that it's been eaten by something like a dogwelk, which is a predatory sea snail here on the shore. It might have drilled into this poor guy's shell and sucked him up like a little barnacle soup. Yummy.
So we've found our way down here to the lower shore, and we're going to find one of the most exciting crustaceans, the common shore crab, or Perthon glas as Gaeilge. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hunker down to spot them, as they look very similar to all these seaweeds. They come in all sorts of colours, ranging from your oranges, reds, browns, all the way to black. So they camouflage really well. Here I found one, just beside this rock under the seaweed. I'm going to pick it up here. You have to be very careful. It has 2 quite large pincers at the front of its body, so if you hold it near the back, you should be safe from any pinches. So this is our common green crab. You can tell it is a common green crab because it has its 5 little serrated edges here along the front of the carapace, and it has 3 little bumps in between its eyes, which are on stalks, which are really handy for crabs. They can pull it into their shell for protection. We also have little mouth parts. You can see it's blowing bubbles there from its mouth parts. Common crabs can't actually breathe out of water, but they can hold their breath for a really long time. So they have to be able to hold their breath all the way until the tide comes in again. So the crab is covered by this very hard shell here, protecting its body. It's called its exoskeleton. So the skeleton is on the outside, and this underside here is called its thorax. Now the really cool thing about the crab is this shell doesn't actually grow with it. So what it has to do to grow is it has to molt its shell. So it has to push itself completely out of its body. We're left behind with this hard exoskeleton. It takes on a lot of water and gets much bigger, and then after a few days it starts to harden up again. But for a few days they are very soft and they're very vulnerable to predators, so they have to hide really well in the rocks and the seaweeds so they don't get eaten by things like birds or other fish. Crabs are decapods. This means they have 10 limbs. The front limbs are pincers, and they have 8 walking legs. They don't walk forwards and backwards like us, but they scuttle sideways. I found another crab. We have a little boy here. We can tell the difference between the girls and the boys. The boys have a V on their abdomen, and the girl has this lovely U shape on her abdomen. Now remember, when you are hunting for crabs, they are predators, but they're also prey. So remember to pop them back underneath the seaweed or rocks where you found them. They're omnivores, so they eat the dead plant and animal material underneath the seaweed, so they can go back and have a little bit of grub when you put them under the seaweed.
Hi, I'm here on the middle shore and I found one of my favourite crabs. So this is a common hermit crab, also known as Fueca glummic. Now, hermit crabs are pretty special for a number of reasons, but one of the things that is really cool about them is, unlike normal shore crabs or edible crabs, they don't cover their entire body with a hard exoskeleton or shell. Instead, just the front part of their body and their claws has that really hard armour suit the Porg was telling you about earlier on them. The back of their body, we call it their abdominum or carapace, that's left vulnerable and soft. So to protect themselves and stop them getting eaten by predators, they wear the empty shell of another animal, like one of the sea snails on the beach. This one is actually wearing a shell from an edible periwinkle. Now, these empty shells that they move into, they can get pretty hard to find. Hermit crabs can grow to between 3 and 10 centimetres in size, and as they grow bigger and they're looking for bigger empty shells, property can be pretty difficult and it can be hard to locate the right shell on the shore. This can end up in hermit crabs actually fighting each other to the death for the right sort of property to move into. Now, the hint for looking for hermit crabs on the shore is, if you're looking in pools of water and you spot a shell that's moving pretty fast across the sand, kind of in a scurrying motion, the chances are that's a hermit crab and not a sea snail. The final last cool adaptation from hermit crabs that I'm going to tell you about today is the fact that their pincers on the front, which is like their large pair of legs at the front of their body, aren't actually the same size. In hermit crabs, one of their pincers is larger because what they do is they use that to seal themselves into their shell when they've pulled themselves back in for protection. So they'll use that pincer almost like closing their front door. Now, I don't know what the property market is like here in Galway, but I'm going to leave this little hermit crab to explore.
So I found my way down to the lower part of the shore. I found a lovely large prawn, also known in Irish as Crustacean cutchin. The prawn is unusual because it is transparent, but also has fluorescent leg joints, which you can see if the light hits them just right. They will often have red and black lines along its body, and the body itself is quite narrow. If we look close to the head, you'll notice a small spike. This is known as the rostrum. Near that spike, you will see very long antennae. They also have really small pincers, not like a crab, but if you look closely, you will notice them there just at the front of the body. The tail is curved in, and this is what it uses to flick and shoot and dash away.
We have had such a great day here on the beach looking for all sorts of crustaceans. But did you know that crabs can not only be found in the ocean, they can be found in fresh water and also living on land too. So there are over 4,500 different species of crab living all over the world.
Actually, the smallest crab in the world is the pea crab, which is only a few millimeters wide. In contrast, the Japanese spider crab is the largest, with a 4-meter leg span. That's like you and me standing head to shoulders.
So now we're going to look back on what we learned.
Now it's time to get creative. While you're on the seashore, why not take that time to do a bit of a scavenger hunt, using the flotsam and jetsam that'll wash up here, such as feathers and driftwood and old seaweed.
Then why not use the things that you have found to make a really big sandcastle, or maybe a giant crustacean monster in the sand? How would you measure it?
Anna, that's a great question. How would we measure them? Maybe I could use my body and we could measure them against my leg, or maybe I could pace it out with my feet. Another activity you might like to do after learning about crustaceans on the shore is maybe write a song. Remember, when you're creating your song and you're writing your verses, think about the different things we've learned today. You might want to talk about where we've been on the shore, some of the special features that the animal had, and maybe what they eat and who eats them.
From all of us here at the Explorers team, remember, keep exploring!
Brilliant. So that was our video all about crustaceans. So now we'll love to take some questions if anyone has any. My first question, Anna, is going to be, can you tell us about your favorite crustacean and why are they your favorite?
Yes, so I love all the crustaceans, and my answer generally varies from day to day, but I love the hermit crab. The hermit crab is born without a shell and it has to find a shell to live in, and from the video you learned that the most common ones are the periwinkle shell that it lives in, but it can grow to about the size of a common whelk shell, which is this one here. And as Noreen said, they're very house proud. So although they're really cute creatures, they can get quite aggressive with each other. If one crab, hermit crab, sees a shell on another hermit crab and he says, "I think I'm bigger than you," and I like your shell, he'll actually go over and he will grab the other hermit crab's shell and bang that hermit crab against a rock until he gets so annoyed that he leaves and he gets the nice, lovely shell to live in. So although they're very cute animals, they're quite boisterous. So I kind of like that about them. They have a dark side. They're a bit mean.
They're willing to fight for a nice house.
Yeah.
I just give a reminder, just because I think one or two of the classes joined us after we started the video. So you're welcome, please, to put any questions into the chat box, or if you'd like to unmute your class and put any questions to us live as well, we'd be happy to take them. I'm always interested as to why crabs walk the way they do. You mentioned in the video they walk sideways, they don't walk the way we do, front and back.
Yes, so crabs have to walk sideways because they have hinges on their legs, and the way the hinge is, it's kind of like our elbows actually. And so if we were walking with our elbows, it would be easier to move this way than it would be to move this way. So they move sideways. And some crabs, like the spider crab or spiny spider crab, which I have here, they can walk going forwards, but they actually have eyes on either side of their head, so they can't actually see what's coming up ahead, and that's why they have these two pointy bits here, so that if they bump into anything, they hits the rock and it doesn't hit its little face here. So
that's clever. There's a question here: which crustacean are you most afraid of?
That's a great question. Here in Ireland, I suppose actually all crustaceans have, well, not all crustaceans, but all crabs have pincers. I wouldn't like to get in a fight with a lobster. And when I'm at the shore, I'm always looking out for what's called a velvet swimmer crab, or it's also known as the devil-eyed crab. It has these red eyes, and it's about the size of a green crab, so it can probably get about that size, but its claws are very big in relation to its body, and it's quite feisty, so I'd stay away from that one.
I've seen those. The red eyes are very, very freaky.
So they are.
I know Noreen had mentioned in the video that the property market can be tough for hermit crabs trying to find their next shell. Do they ever use anything else as a house if they couldn't find a little periwinkle or something as a house?
So it will use anything that it can kind of shelter in. So I know there's cartoon books of like hermit crabs living in like little glass bottles, and they will live in anything that they kind of think looks a little bit like a nice little caravan. They'll get into anything that can kind of look like it'll protect it. So yeah, that's why we have to keep our beaches clear and clean, so that our hermit crabs will live in our periwinkles and not our Coke cans.
Yeah. And how far would those little hermit crabs travel or walk, or do they stick local?
They generally stick to their seashore. So the seashore is giant when you're a tiny little crab. So they would generally stick to the area that they're in.
Great. Miss Kylie's 6th class are wondering, what is the biggest crab?
So the biggest crab is the Japanese spider crab, and he can grow up to, from leg span, it can get to 4 meters. So very, very big. In Ireland, the biggest crab that we have is actually the box crab, and it looks very similar to the Japanese spider crab, and it can get to about 2 meters, but they're deep sea species. So they can.
So we don't need to be afraid of them biting our toes if we're on the beach this summer.
No, definitely. Yeah.
And if we are on the beach this summer, what's the best way for us to have a look for crustaceans on the beach or in rock pools, or where would you recommend, or how?
So the best time to look for your crabs is when the tide is out. So for green crabs, you're looking under all the seaweeds. They're fairly common, so you'll find them under rocks and seaweeds. And then for the hermit crabs, they kind of prefer to be in the water. So be looking in your rock pools, and also when the tide is in, have a little paddle in the water and just look down. And if you just stand still for a minute and you look down and you see a lot of periwinkle shells, and if anyone's moving really, really quickly, it's generally the hermit crab. So that's the best way to find them.
You have to be quick to catch them though.
Yes, very, very quick. They do scuttle off very, very quickly.
And how long can they live for?
The hermit crab.
Yeah.
The hermit crab probably has a short enough lifespan, probably about maybe 5 to 10 years, maybe. So not huge, not hugely long. Now our lobsters, they can grow and live to about 80 years. So they can get very, very old. And scientists are doing studies on them because they thought they were immortal. So if a lobster doesn't get caught and eaten or get a disease, they can kind of just keep on living and growing. So there's a lot of research being done into that now, which would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool. An immortal lobster can live forever. And how big would an old lobster get?
Big, to about 1 meter. So quite big, yeah. And I think they can get up to like 20 kg or something. So quite substantial for a lobster.
Wow, that's massive. What's the biggest lobster you've ever seen?
Oh, probably about close 80 centimeters, maybe, quite big. And we get to see a lot of big creatures. Anytime there's kind of like a large specimen found anywhere, we do get sent photos, or we get to take a look, or the fishermen will send them to us. So I'm lucky enough to have seen my share of lovely lobsters.
Cool. There's a question here: can crustaceans live on land and in the water?
Yeah, so you can find crustaceans in and out of the water. Some crabs live just on land, land crabs. Now, we don't have any of those in Ireland. Well, they don't live just on land, but they can live on land. We don't have any of those in Ireland. They're in your kind of warmer areas. And our crustaceans, they will kind of live in the area of the beach and the intertidal zone that's not always covered with water. So they can live outside of water for half of their kind of lives until the tide kind of comes in again.
Okay, so they can survive a little bit out of water.
Yes.
I know obviously what we do at the beach and how we live our lives has an impact on all of the other creatures that live around us, and including our coastline. So is there anything that we should do or that we could do to protect our seashore and make sure all those creatures and crustaceans have a home still?
Yeah, so the easiest thing that we can do is when we know we're going to the beach, bring gloves and a bag and do a little bit of a litter pick, because one of the things that is threatening them the most would be our marine litter. And it's really easy for every one of us to, just take 2 minutes to do a beach clean and just keep the area clean. And of course, when you're out exploring in the rock pools, just be mindful that you're in their home. So not to be kind of running around in the rock pools without looking where you're going, because you could be standing on a number of sea creatures that you don't want to be standing on. So that's something we can do too.
Okay, that's good advice. I know you mentioned in the video that crustaceans are kind of scavengers. They'll hunt and kind of see what they can find. But if they had their pick of the day, if it was a great day, what would they have for dinner?
I think they'll always go for their mussels, and they love to eat their shellfish, their fish dinner. So when they can get their claws on them, they do love to eat their shellfish, their mussels and their clams and things like that.
Great, and they're in nice plentiful supply on our seashore, so our crustaceans are thriving, surely.
Luckily, yeah.
And I know we saw some shrimps and things like that, and there was mention that they have fluorescent knees, was it?
The prawns, the shrimp.
Yeah. You can kind of see through them nearly.
Oh yes, so yeah, you can so they're very translucent, so you can actually see right through them. So if they're eating something bright like krill, which is very orange in color, you can actually see that in their tummies if you look really closely. It's really cool.
Wow, so they can't eat a bar of chocolate in secret.
Get away
Everyone
with
would
it.
know.
Yeah, no, they
You'd
can't
give
do
it
that.
away. What is the most vicious crustacean?
I'm going to come back to the devil-eye crab again, the velvet swimmer. I had an unpleasant experience with the velvet swimmer crab when I was in college. I was diving and there was one there, and it actually kind of hooked onto my glove, and it wouldn't let me go until I was actually coming out of the water, and it was about 25 minutes later. So just not happy with those. So and he came at me. I wasn't in his space. He came at me. So I think that's the one for me, that is, personally.
And if you were maybe a small crustacean on the seashore, what would be the most vicious crustacean from their point of view? Like if you were a little shrimp or a little crab, are they at risk from fellow crustaceans?
They're probably more at risk from seabirds, to be honest, and other larger fish. They're like, they will eat each other if they, get a chance, but it's not, the general. Maybe the lobster. The lobster has very, very big claws. I wouldn't want to get in a fight with a lobster. So I have two claws here. We have our right claw and our left claw, and you can see that they're slightly different. So this one has a crushing kind of motion here. So it uses this to crush its muscles, and this one here is much sharper, and it will use that to cut up its prey. So it can crush the muscle shell open with this one, and then it will slice it here nicely for its teeth. So I wouldn't want to come across a lobster either. So maybe they'd be one of the vicious ones.
How tall is the Japanese spider crab?
Tall. So it's not actually very, very tall as it is wide. So it's 4 meters long, but it wouldn't even be a meter in height. It's very it's a bit squat.
Yeah, so has kind of gangly legs, does it?
Yeah, really, really long gangly legs.
I wouldn't like to come across one of those fellas either.
They look very unusual, all right.
And is a lobster the biggest crustacean that we'd have here? Obviously, a Japanese spider crab must live close to Japan, so we don't need to worry about those.
No, but we do get our box crabs. So the box crabs come up to 2 meters, but they're in kind of deeper waters. But fishermen have caught them off the coast of Ireland, and they look similar to the Japanese spider crab. They have the big long legs. And a very kind of solid, they look quite like the spider crab as well. They have a very solid frame, but they have very, very long legs. So that's probably the box crab would be the biggest that we have.
Okay. And do we eat, or could we eat much of these crustaceans that we could find on the seashore?
Yeah, so the most common one that we would eat is our brown crab, and we call that the edible crab. So when we're eating crab in Ireland, it's generally this one, but apparently the spider crab is very, very tasty. We don't tend to eat it in Ireland. We catch them, but we export them all. So I have been told that they're very tasty. I haven't tried them myself, so I can't tell you exactly. But maybe we should be kind of eating these guys ourselves instead of sending it all away. So you would eat those and the lobster, obviously, and then you'd eat your prawns. And your Dublin Bay prawns and things like that. So yeah, we kind of rely heavily on the crustaceans that we find on the seashore for food.
Great. I have tasted spider crab and it is delicious.
Good. Yay. I have a first-hand proof.
First-hand account. Yeah. What was your favorite shellfish? Would you ever eat anything unusual off the seashore or leave them be?
I'm not very courageous when it comes to it. I'll try anything once, but I don't eat that much. But a Dublin Bay prawn has to be the favorite of mine. or a lot of people, I think. I haven't actually ever tasted lobster or spider crab or brown crab even. Yeah, I'm not very courageous.
There's a question just coming here. Will more than one hermit crab ever get into a shell?
No, I don't think so. Only if they're fighting and they're trying to figure out who's going to stay in the shell, but they wouldn't ever stay in the same shell. They're kind of competitive creatures.
And hermit crabs, am I right in thinking they like to be by themselves? They wouldn't like to share their spot?
Yeah, they definitely don't want to share their shell. Yeah, no. They like to have things living on them. Some hermit crabs will have like they'll let an anemone sit on its shell, and it kind of uses that as protection. But it wouldn't actually want anything in the actual shell with it.
Okay, that's great. Thanks everyone for those questions. I was just going to ask yourself, Anna, there was a mention in the video of your guides for accessing the seashore safely and things like that. Would you like to just tell the teachers and classes here with us your website maybe so they can have a look at those?
Yes, and I'll pop it into the chat as well. So it's www.explorers.ie. And when you go onto that, you can find teachers' resources, and there's guidebooks, and there's seashore guides. It's all free, and you can download them, and it'll show you the conservation code and safety on the seashore and what you'd need to prepare for a seashore safari for yourself or your group. So they're all there under the teachers' guides. There's a lovely workbook as well, my Seashore workbook guide, where you can fill out if you are taking a trip to the beach, and there's little sections where you can fill out bits about the animals that you found down at the beach. So they're all on explorers.ie. I spelled that right, EXPL? I spelled
yes.
explorers.ie.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna, for answering all of those questions. And thanks to everyone in the classes for putting them into the chat for us. Just before we go, I just want to give a reminder to the teachers and to all the classes that we're running a schools competition. So if you would like to do a picture or a poster covering a fact or something interesting or something new that you learned today about a crustacean or about the seashore, put that into your drawing or into your poster and send it in to us by email. It's calmast@wit.ie. We have a prize, or I think multiple prizes for every class group. So if you send in those, you're in with a chance to win. So we can't wait to see them. So thanks everyone so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed and we hope you learned loads about crustaceans. And thanks so much to Anna and the Atlanticarium in Galway for joining us today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.